Learning Officer. And, Jake, what he's going to talk about is that nearly everything we engage in is rooted in language. Language is our tool for persuasion, communication, and forging connections. It's a means through which leaders inspire, sales professionals close deals, and parents guide their children. So Jake is a pioneer in conversational dynamics and a highly regarded fractional chief learning officer. He's revolutionizing sales through his adaptive conversation blueprint. So Jake, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're very excited to have you and very excited to learn about verbal alchemy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Rick, and welcome everyone. Today, we're going to talk about words, their impact, and how they can be used for you and your business to make an impression and make it quickly. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is I think we all need to agree that perception is reality. Everybody's reality is firmly based on their perception. So I'll give you a great example. When you take a cell phone call and you look down and you see that caller ID or that picture comes up for the person in your contact list, and the first thing you think is, oh, man, I just don't have time for this person. And you all know who that is. You just thought of them right now when I was telling you about this. That's perception. It has nothing to do with the call itself. It's just how you perceive it's going to go. So if we translate that into our businesses, we need to understand that we don't need to sell to a person or their reality. We have to sell to their perception. And their perception could be markedly different than what reality is. So today's presentation is going to talk a lot about sales and marketing and how we're going to shift perception through our verbiage. Because there's one thing that's an absolute certainty, in that words can shape reality. But we can't go much further without talking about conditioning first. You all know the experiments with Pavlov's dogs. He fed them food, rang the bell at the same time, and eventually the ringing of the bell caused salivation. Well, B.F. Skinner came up with his own theory, and his theory was that free will is an illusion. So every decision we make is based on conditioning, and the conditioning guides our actions. And the decisions we make are largely predicated on decisions we made earlier that had a great result. So if a salesperson calls or somebody calls selling a product, in the past I've said not interested and they went away. Great outcome for me. So I get conditioned for that not interested, or the price is too high, or I've got 12 of those already. So a lot of what we talk about today is going to be based on conditioning. And it's important that we just understand that conditioning guides our actions to a large degree. We're pre-programmed. So the question we're going to try and answer today is, are we all just pre-programmed? And the answer is partially. So conditioning does do us a lot of good. Knives are sharp, flames are hot, lions are dangerous, guns kill people. We all have certain things that are already ingrained in us. But there are certain parts of our conditioning we can break through. And with a lot of our customers, they have that conditioning that they're just gut checking their reaction to you. And it's not based on the reality, it's based on their perceptions. So the real question is, can we affect that programming? And the answer is yes, but it needs to be the right words at the right time. It needs to be given in the right way. And like this presentation, it can't give more than small chunks at a time. Because one thing we know for sure is that the human brain does not read and listen very well. So if I'm presenting and I'm putting up a huge slide for you to read, and you're reading it while you're trying to listen, one of those messages isn't getting through. So I'm going to chunk everything today into digestible pieces. All of the things I'm going to be talking to you about today were proven through case studies. And I'm going to take you through the case studies, and then I'm going to show you what the results were and how it applies to your business. And we're going to be talking about this in a couple of ways. So case study number one, done in a New York public library. And interns were asked to cut in line at a busy copier in the New York City Public Library. As you may guess, New Yorkers are not super responsive to people just jumping in line. So the people who designed the study said to the interns, okay, look, the cutting in line didn't work, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to use the word because. And I want you to say because and then give a good reason. So,
Sorry.
That's okay. So because my child's waiting in the car, because my significant other's waiting at dinner, because I have to get back to work. When they use the word because with a great reason, they found out, I think what's probably obvious to all of us, that compliance went up. The fact is about 60% of the people let them cut in line with a good reason. Overall, not fascinating, pretty much common sense. But here's where it gets cool. So then the study designer said, now I want you to use the word because, but I want you to put a reason after it that's redundant. So I want you to say, I'd like to cut in line because I need to make copies. Logic would say that wouldn't work great because everybody in line needs to make copies. But what happened was the compliance rate remained at almost 60%. So what that meant was it didn't matter what came after the word because. What mattered was that they used the word. So here's the real big question. Why does that work? What does it matter? Well, there's a lot of theories. And one of the big theories is from the time we're born, we're always asking why. Why is the sky blue? Why don't fish drown in the water? Why is the grass green? Why doesn't the grass puncture my foot? We're always asking questions. So we're used to the cause and effect. So if we're so used to cause and effect and we're always looking for the why, psychologists believe that if you give them any reason why, you justify a person's willingness to accept what you're going to say and do. Fascinating stuff. The question is, how does that apply to you? And the reason is this. Always tell people why they should listen to you. Always give that because. I'd like you to hear this out because. I'd like you to invest in me because. You should listen to what I have to say about my product because. Because can increase the compliance of your message by 60%. And yet so few people use it. So point one of the day, adopt because and use it in your pitches, your messaging, and when you want people to do something.
I have a question, Jake.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll echo. I'm just in my agreement with your theory, because if someone is trying to cut in line on the car and they go, can I get in? I go, yeah, no problem. If they don't wave, I get pissed off, right? So it's like as simple as that. So do you think that part of why we don't get people to do things is we don't, let's use because as an ask. We don't even ask. Is that, or is it the word because, or is because is the attempt to ask?
It's a great question, Rick. And I think the jury's still out on that, but part of it is definitely not doing the ask. One thing that I talk to people about all the time is how do you get referrals? And they say, well, I don't. And I ask them why. And they say, because I don't ask. And you're right, because is that way to give justification or to create the ask. A lot of times people who are unwilling to do something just kind of need that justification to do it. And because is one of those ways to give that justification. Does that answer your question?
Perfectly. Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Excellent. You're welcome.
Corey has a question.
Go ahead, Corey.
Thank you. I think one thing also might be it's a word that indicates an acknowledgement of the other person's position. If you cut in without acknowledging them, without looking at them, or saying because and giving some sort of reason, you're not acknowledging them at all. And maybe that brings people into a space where they take offense because there's no even acknowledgement of them.
That's an excellent point, Corey. And you're right. It does show an acknowledgement. So I would agree. That's probably a factor in it as well.
Right. And just for a technical thing, if anyone has a question or something, there's the reactions on the left-hand side. Just make sure if you raise your hand, make sure it alerts me so I don't miss it in case of anything. So sorry, Corey. Sorry, Jake, for interrupting.
No, you're fine. All right. So let's talk about another thing that's super intriguing and backed by science, and that is actions equal identities. So let me ask you a question. Oops. Sorry about that. My mouse is going crazy. So let me ask you this. Who likes dogs more? Rebecca loves dogs. Alice is a dog lover. Who likes dogs more, in your opinion? And I can't see the chat, so I'm relying on you on this one.
Okay, Corey has a question. Corey has an answer too. He said, I think he meant Alice. Kevin, how about you? 2 for Kevin. Debbie? 2. All right, I'll just be contrarian and I'll say 1.
Excellent. I love the contrarians. Perfect. Let's take a look at another one. And I'm going to show you why Alex is a dog lover is the answer that we're looking for. Who's more liberal? Joe is liberal or Sam is a liberal? And listen, I have no political
Corey's got a 2. 2. Again, I'll be contrarian and I'll say 1.
Fantastic. Love the contrarian. So thank you for that. So we're going to talk again about why Sam is a liberal or Alice is a dog lover shows a little bit more dedication to that cause. Let's take another example. Which sounds worse? Sally didn't put the dishes away or Sally is a slob?
Okay, Kevin's a deuce. Debbie's a deuce. Corey's a deuce. And Rick's a 1.
Excellent. God, love those contrarians. And let's look at the last example before we go any further. Which should the lawyer use? Jeff is a criminal or Jeff made some bad choices?
Corey's a deuce. Kevin's a deuce. Debbie's a deuce. I'm a 1.
Fantastic. So let's talk about this a little bit. Labels are super strong. When we look at labeling, we look at making people part of a group. So when we look at labels, they're usually a noun, which means that we're giving them ownership of that. They're actually part of a tribe or a group or a coalition of some kind. And it makes a difference. It gives it permanence. So when you look at, I apologize. So when they establish permanence, it's permanence through making it a noun. So a dog lover. And it's important to realize this because if you think about it, you go to somebody and they say, are you a fractional? Well, I do fractional work versus I'm a fractional executive. With the lawyer, it was kind of a different story. Since the ownership was so strong, is he a criminal or did he make bad choices? We're taking away that permanence. So the thing to keep in mind about labels is that they establish almost a timeline. If I'm a dog lover, there's an implication here. It implies I've always loved dogs. It implies I currently love dogs, and it implies that I'm going to love dogs well into the future. If I'm a liberal, that's also implying that I've been that in the past, I'll be it now, and I'm probably going to be that in the future. It's a fascinating difference, and it's one that lawyers and marketers and salespeople know well. If I can make you part of a select group, if I can give you an identity and it's a positive one, then I want to make you part of that group. If it is a negative identity, I want to take you out of that group. You're not a criminal. You just made some bad choices. So labels are extremely potent and super strong. And because they establish permanence, they make it appear as though it always has been and it always will be. The other thing about a label is it makes it very personal. So Sally didn't just not put the dishes away. Sally's a slob. And both of those may sound like they mean the same thing or could be interchangeable, but the fact is one is permanent, one is personal, and the other is not. It was an event. It's something that happened. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how powerful this can be, and we're going to take a look at a case study. This case study was done with children in kindergarten. And the goal with the teachers was to get them to pick up their toys. And the fact is, no surprise to anybody in this group, the fact is it didn't work. If I ask a child to pick up a toy, they're like, yeah, I'll do that, and then I'm going to run, but I'm not going to pick up any of the others. And if you have kids, you know this for a fact. So how did they solve it? The first way they tried to solve it was say, will you help pick up the toys? So it's an action, right? It's a verb. Will you help pick up the toys? But then they tried another twist. They said, will you be my helper? Will you be the teacher's helper? And they found that the compliance rate went up by almost 80%, to the point where it became such a positive identity that the child went home proudly and said, I was the teacher's helper. So it made them part of a positive tribe, and it gave them a positive identity. So once they proved this in kids, they took it and thought, how will this translate to adults? So one county was having problems getting people out to vote. And they're saying, it's election day, get out and vote, or do your civic duty and get out and vote. But what they found was the compliance rate year after year was the same, and it was actually starting to drop off. So what do you think they did? What was the answer? Anybody?
Rock the vote.
Still a verb. How did they make this a noun and get people out there?
With the stickers, I voted.
Be a voter.
Oh, there you go. That must be my marketing people. It's election day. Become a voter. And that increased people coming out by 35%. 35%. That's well outside standard deviation, but it gave people an identity and it gave them a positive one. And although I can't say who told me about the sticker, I can say you were dead on. That's another way to identify people as part of that tribe. You were out there as a voter. They put out stickers that said, I'm a voter.
So it's almost like a velvet rope at a club, right? The club may stink inside, but that velvet rope says this place is awesome. And you want to get it.
Exactly. Right. And then you can say, I'm a member. So all of these have potency. And how this translates to you is that when you talk about the work you do, don't say, I do fractional work. I'm a fractional leader. I'm a fractional executive. Make it a noun. Take away the verb. I'm not going to go to somebody to paint my portrait who says, I like to paint. I'm going to go to the person that says, I'm a painter. There's a huge difference. So when creating your messages, make sure that you're getting people to feel good about themselves and have them feel good about what you're doing and what they do. So if I talk to somebody who says, hey, I run a manufacturing plant, I say, oh, you're a manufacturer. It's like, yes, I am.
Right.
Subtle verbiage change, huge difference in reactions from the other people. Because one psychological thing that's absolutely true is if you get someone to feel good about themselves, they will feel good about talking to you. There's actually neurotransmitter studies that have been done that it raises dopamine when somebody makes you feel good about yourself. Same amount as eating a chocolate chip cookie, which for me is a ton, by the way. But if you can get somebody to feel good about themselves, they'll feel good about talking to you. And a lot of that is really boosting up what they do. Turn it into a noun, take away the verb.
Interesting.
So let's look at a dilemma. This is kind of a riddle, and I'll rely on you guys to jump out here and tell me how you'd fix it. So you need to fix a lit candle to a wall. All you have is a lit candle and a box of thumbtacks. So anybody have any ideas to the answer to this riddle?
No, I don't. Anyone else? Just spit it out if you got it. Wait, Debbie, you're on mute. Debbie, you're on mute.
Not sure. Use the wax from the lit candle.
That's certainly a great option, Debbie. Absolutely. Great answer. Any other answers coming in?
I don't have one.
Oh,
Not
my
that
thought
smart.
as well, the wax on the wall is a glue.
Okay. Yep, that's certainly an option as well. Let me throw out a potential solution, and this is leading somewhere. I'm not normally a riddles guy, but this is leading somewhere. Here's a potential solution. Empty the tacks from the box. Use the tacks to fasten the box to the wall. Use the box as a shelf for the lit candle. One possible solution out of many. And this isn't an aha moment. It is to ask, why wasn't that easy? Why wasn't that an easy answer? Anyone?
Could you go back to the original or the previous slide?
I'd be happy to.
Oh, it does say a box full of thumbtacks. I didn't realize there was a box.
No problem at all.
Interesting.
So here's why this is kind of a stumper. Because we think in terms of should and not could. What normally happens when something happens is, oh, the box should hold the tacks. And the candle should be in a candle holder. And this should happen to that. And it limits our thinking. Debbie, you came up with a great suggestion, as did the other person. I'm not sure who it was, but you came up with a great idea to use melting wax to fasten the candle to the wall, because that's not something that you would normally think of, but it's something you can do. And this leads to our next case study. They took a group of test subjects and they tried to get them to think more creatively. And their goal was to give them an option of how to build a business. And they were to present this to a group of investors. So they were given an idea and they were told they were going to have to present this. And they asked them, how can you do this? How can you get this done? Give us a proposal. And they put these people into two groups. And they said to one group, I want you to think about the way you normally build a business. Give them a structure. Give them as down pat of a blueprint as you can. And they took another group and they said, do it anything but normal. Pretend you have trillions of dollars set aside. Pretend you have unlimited resources. You have the biggest network in the world, and come up with a proposal. And they found, obviously, that the two groups came up with completely different sets of ideas. And they turned should into could. So the one group A thought of what they should do. Group B thought of what they could do. And if you're familiar with Walt Disney at all, he had a famous saying that was, I think about what everybody else does, and then I do the exact opposite. So when they gave unlimited resources to people, they found that they got higher quality solutions and they were 3 times more creative. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, of course, if I had unlimited resources, I could get creative too. But if I can recommend the book, 10x is easier than 2x, it talks about the ability to think in terms of what you can do. And here's another great example. I have a friend of mine. I used to always say, I should have done it this way. God, why didn't I do it that way? And a friend of mine said to me years ago, you shouldn't have anything. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that's really gripping. That's great, because I always think based on what I know now, what I should have done then is easy. But the real question is, what could I have done? What were my options at the time based on what I knew? And when you start translating this forward like this study did, what you find is it allows people to consider multiple options, alternatives, and outcomes. So you're thinking outside of what you would normally think. And if you think in terms of, if everything were unlimited, what can I do? You find some things you list, actually you can do. Let's take a look at another example real quick. We'll give it a go. You made a pencil mark and you don't have an eraser. How can you get rid of the pencil mark? Think outside of what you should do versus what you could do.
I have no idea. Get a new piece of paper.
That's what I was just going to say.
Of course, you could do that. Right? Absolutely.
All right, Debbie, we win.
You can do that.
Yeah.
You can use the rubber on the bottom of your sneaker. You could paper white over the pencil mark. There's a lot of things that you can do. But the point of the exercise is to look at things in your future and in your past in terms of what can you do or what could you have done, because it'll open up your mind. This is kind of, what do you say when you talk to yourself? Takeaway number 2 is, if you think about it, and I'm not sure who said this, I didn't attribute this very well, but if you eliminate what's absolutely thoroughly impossible, you're left with what's probable, or what you can try, or what you can do. Last but not least is, and I'll tell everybody, I sometimes have troubles at the end of the day for decisions I made. One of the best self-talks I ever instituted, I started doing this years ago, is forgive yourself at the end of the day. You made some tough calls, you made some dumb ones, you made first smart ones. Forgive yourself at the end of the day. You can't, should or shouldn't have anything. Forgive yourself.
Excellent.
All right. So talking to yourself, as we just kind of alluded to, is huge. And when we're about to make a big presentation, we're going on a first date, we're about to have a difficult conversation, think about what you're saying to yourself. What words, what verbiage are you using when you talk to yourself? Think about in terms of who would you turn to for advice, and what would those people tell you? So Debbie's doing a huge presentation. What was Debbie's friend say? Oh, Debbie, you're going to do it. Oh, you'll be just fine. Oh, you've always done great in the past. Just go ahead and do it. It doesn't make us feel better, right? It doesn't quite satisfy that itch.
Yeah.
So scientists looked at it and they came up with a great way to do this. So they took a group of test subjects and they asked them to give a huge presentation. They gave it to them and they said, in front of you are people who are trying to think of the word. Wow. Talk about verbal alchemy. I can't even get the verbiage out. Yeah. They were looking at people who were recruiting public speakers for high-paying speaking jobs. So they said, you need to make an impression, you need to do it quickly, and they tried to figure out how to keep those people from getting nervous. So they broke them into 2 groups. And what they did was in the two groups, they said, one group, we want you to talk to yourself in the third person. In another group, we want you to talk to yourself in the first person. So one group is going to say, I'm going to be fine. I've done this before. I'm going to be okay. I'll get through this. The other group was told to say, Jake's going to be fine. Jake will do this. Jake has always knocked it out of the park before. And they wanted to see if that would make a difference. What they found was it made a huge difference. They found that third person talkers were more confident, less nervous, and performed better. So let me just throw this out to the group. Why in God's name would this work? Why would talking like Elmo help you?
Yeah. The only thing I can think of is that you're almost having like an outer body experience. It's not you. It's someone else, someone who's going to perform, because when you're on that stage, you are performing. So like an actor almost, if you will. That's my thought.
Rick, that is really astute. And that is, in fact, the answer. What they found was the speakers distanced themselves from the scenarios and asked themselves to see it in a different way. So they almost looked at themselves out of body, so to speak. And one of the great reasons this works is if you ever study neurolinguistic programming, which I know you've all heard of because of Tony Robbins and other people who use it effectively, one of the big things he does is he has you dissociate from yourself. So let's say you want to stop having a snack after 8 p.m. at night. Well, you picture yourself sitting on the sofa having that snack at night, and you talk to that other person. You kind of override that and reframe it and talk to yourself as if you're another person telling you, don't have that 8 p.m. bowl of ice cream. So this is very well accepted in its principles, and it works great. So if you're about to write a contract, if you're about to give a presentation, talk to a potential client, go on a public speaking gig, talk to yourself in the third person, and you'll find it will actually help. Another huge thing is past versus present. And this is one thing I see with a lot of my clients. The past versus present thing is something that we have a hard time getting by, but the impact it will make for you is huge. So let's start with looking at do versus done. Somebody says, hey, Corey, I'm really in need of some branding. And you say, oh, I've done that for many of my clients. The impact is I've done it in the past. I may not do it now, but in the past, I've done it successfully sometimes. Versus, oh yeah, I do that for many of my clients. It gives it a permanence. So when we establish past versus present and we make it about the present, it changes the entire face of the message that you're giving. Think about it in the way of testimonials. Yeah, clients have written testimonials for me. Or, yes, clients write testimonials for me. The impact of that is so dramatically different. Yes, they've done it in the past, but now they still do it currently. And it sounds like it's actually still going on. But the impact to your customers, dramatic difference. The same thing can be said of action versus potential.
Jake, I'll go back to your slide. I'm a dog lover. Here's Tuna. I got my dog. Thanks.
Oh, cool. I wish I could see it.
He heard the slide. He's a golden retriever. Sorry, go ahead.
Nice. Oh, I love dogs. I have a dog because I'm a dog lover.
Dog lover. There you go.
One of the biggest things that I deal with when I'm working with clients is the fact that they have trouble asking for referrals. And I hear them often saying, would you be willing to refer me? So I'm kind of placing it out in the future at an undefined time, and I'm giving you an option. Will you may or may not refer me under the exact right circumstances? Will you refer me. Makes it more definitive. It's asking for it right now. It's not people have referred me in the past. People are referring me. It's not would you be willing to refer me? It's will you refer me? By taking out that uncertainty or that cloudy or nebulous area, you're asking them to take an action right away. If you combine a lot of these things together, it's amazing the impact that it can have. Let's address another piece. People are uncomfortable with science, and they actually did a study on this. And they said that people of European descent have a discomfort level of a silence that goes around 4 seconds. So as seconds 3 and 4 tick off, something happens in the European mind that says this silence is uncomfortable. I need to break it. If we look at our Japanese counterparts, they use silence intervals up to 8 seconds in a conversation to show respect and deference to the person that's talking, to show they're listening, and to contemplate what they're going to say next. So silence is super important in a presentation. And in that, I would like to introduce a 2-second rule. That 2-second rule says that when someone is done talking or when someone is asked a question, you pause for up to 2 seconds to make sure that they're done with their thought and to give yourself time to think during that process. So 2 seconds can seem like a long time, and this takes some practice. But if you give that 2 seconds, you gather yourself, you're also showing that they're being heard. So let me ask a quick question. How many people are comfortable with silence? And you know who you are if you're not.
I'm not. I respond immediately.
And that's so normal. So the idea is to try the 2-second rule and see if you can do that. There was an amazing study done where they took people in a study environment at a university, and they had them listen to 2 speakers. One speaker was a Fortune 5 CEO. And when they gave a talk, they added a lot of ums and uhs and a lot of connecting words. And then they had them listen to a small business owner who had no public speaking experience whatsoever. And their talk was flawless. As a matter of fact, when the person was thinking about what to say next, instead of adding a connector word, they paused for up to 2 seconds. It was overwhelming, the preference of the study people. They preferred the person who could do it without all the ums and uhs, and added bits of silence in there to emphasize a point and to think about what they were going to say next. The staggering part about that study was that the way the person talked overrode their title, their position, and how long they had been a speaker. So even though that guy had been a Fortune 5 CEO and had all the clout in the world, it meant nothing compared to the way they talked, their confidence in what they said, and how they said it. So your language, your verbiage, and how you do it speaks volumes over who you are and what you've done. So plan things out when you talk to them. Another huge hint is to slow down your cadence. So if you find yourself talking fast, if you find yourself not doing the pauses, make a deliberate attempt to slow down. Best way I've found to do that is to almost set a stopwatch. Every 2 minutes, check in with somebody to make sure you're on the same page. Every 10 minutes, stop completely and say, I've been talking for a while. Do you have any questions? I call it the 210 rule, and it is extremely effective. I've doubled sales just getting a sales force to be able to slow down and do the 210 rule. Last but not least, the whole thing with silence is golden is don't be the first one to talk. When you're talking with a client, when you're interviewing them and you're going over things, encourage them to talk as much as humanly possible. Because here's what happens. When you encourage someone else to talk and you encourage them to talk about themselves, the law of reciprocation kicks in, and it happens in all of us. After a while, that person goes, wow, I've talked for a long time. Tell me about yourself now. If we make sure they talk first and we show deference to what they're saying, the quality of the conversation goes up. Not only that, but when they ask you to start talking and they say, what do you do and how can you help? Their receptivity for your message is at its peak. And think about that versus a salesperson that you pick up the phone, they say, how are you? Then they slam you with the message right away when your receptivity is at its lowest. So silence truly is golden when it comes to a conversation. We talked about differs by nationality already. The last piece of the presentation is I want to encourage you to use empathetic statements along with any questions that you have. As a sales trainer and as somebody who's been doing this a long time over a number of different countries, I will tell you if there's one part I could pull out of a sales presentation is the answer and objections. I hate that part of the presentation because we act as though that's a specific piece and we need to get ready for that. My encouragement to you is this. Instead of asking questions, try making empathetic statements. And you do that by rephrasing and repeating what you've heard. You'll be amazed at how much a person will reveal to you when you just take that step. Great example is at the end of the day, my wife's been in banking for 20 plus years, so she throws a lot of acronyms around. So when we get to the end of the day and she goes on a tear about how her day was, I truly, truly want to listen and I want to acknowledge, but I don't always know the right questions to ask. So she'll come up with a term and she'll say, Jake, we talked about ACH today. Well, I don't really know what that stands for. I'm pretty sure I know what it is. But instead of saying, what does that stand for? I'll just repeat it back. Oh, ACH? Yeah, Jake, you know, it's this, this, and this. And we had to do it with the tax department and we're doing that with the PRDs. Really? The PRDs? Yeah, those are this, this, and this. Repeat back what a person is saying in a different way instead of asking a question and watch what a difference it makes. One of the primary objections I get to this is, Jake, they're going to notice I'm repeating back. I can tell you, I've talked to all of you on this call, or at least the ones I saw coming in. I've spoken to all of you individually. I've done this to all of you. And not one of you has said, hey, you're repeating back exactly what I said. Stop doing that. It feels like it's going to be obvious, but it doesn't. And here's what it does for you. If you're going to repeat back something said, it requires active listening. It requires you to focus on what they're saying. I promise you, if you had something to say to them, you'll remember it later. You'll never forget what you want to say. But if you just repeat back, you're forced to listen and you're forced to clarify. And they want to give you more information because what's everybody's favorite topic to talk about? Themselves. So verbal alchemy isn't always about just the right word. It's not always about the because or the could or should or referring to myself in the third person. It's doing it at the right time and it's doing it for the right reasons. And it's making sure that it's at the right point in the conversation to make an impact. Because if I use because at the right time, or I use should at the right time, or I turn a verb into a noun at the wrong time, it's not going to have that. There are a million case studies out there that show these type of words that you can use. If for some reason you want to investigate these more, I've got a list of authors that can help you. It will help you with your messaging. It'll help you to recruit clients. And I will tell you, this is part of my outreach. So I'm going to give you kind of one of those little secrets of how I use this in my developing business or my cold outreach. I will reach out to other fractional officers. And my first 3 outreaches are nothing about me or my business. My first one is, I notice you're another fractional. I was curious if we could connect. The second one is, what verticals are you in? I'd really love to help you out in any industry that you're in. And then the third one is, how can I help you? Can I support you on LinkedIn? Can I make some connections? Is there anybody in my network that you would like to get introduced to? First 3 outreaches, nothing about me. And what happens religiously with 87% of the people, last time I counted, 87% of people come back and say, I've talked nothing but about me. What can I do for you? What do you do? And at that point, when I give what I do and who I am, the impact has a far, far greater effect on them than it would have had I introduced myself or talked about me at the beginning. And I get more requests for phone calls from those type of reach outs than I have in any other cold reach I've ever done. I get about 20 calls a week where I meet with people. Now, granted, I don't convert them all to business. I don't want to give that illusion. But that outreach where it's all about them and not about me, it works magic.
Yeah, I concur with that.
So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts? I'm even open to disagreements.
Now, a lot of the message that you're giving, it's kind of the same thing that I have heard and have used in just trying to teach effective communication as well, just in one-on-one. The empathy part, the could versus should, all makes great sense. And I never really translated it to using it for myself in explaining who I am and what I do. So it was helpful.
It's kind of funny, right? It's that old adage that the worst looking house on the block is the one owned by the construction worker. Yeah. We work on ourselves last, and it's hysterical how much we help other people, and we have so much trouble helping ourselves. So I'm glad this helped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as someone who I interviewed 642 fractionals last year and almost 300 this year, I hear a lot of people say, I just do X. I'm an accountant. I'm a bookkeeper. I'm a this, I'm a that, whatever. And that just thinking of those conversations, the language that they're using is not adding to the conversation, I guess. So this is all about furthering the conversation, I believe, making them feel comfortable with you.
It is. And to add to that, Rick, one thing that I've done over the years when I've helped coach people on reaching out is try to eliminate the question, how are you? It doesn't matter. You don't care. They don't care. It's equivalent to hello. My wife and I were out shopping, and we walked by another couple, and my eyes met with the other gentleman, and I nodded my head and I said, hey. And he said, fine, thanks. How are you? It was a conversation that never happened. So here's an alternative. When you go to call somebody, do a little bit of research on them. And when they pick up the phone, say, I am so happy you picked up the phone. I honestly couldn't wait to talk to you because I looked at your business and it's super impressive. Imagine the difference that makes versus, hey, it's Jake. How are you? I wanted to call and talk to you about Jake Stahl Consulting today. I actually had people saying, wow, you were looking forward to talking to me? And I genuinely was, but it breaks the conditioning of fine, thanks, how are you? And this is a sales call, and they're going to try to push something. Subtle differences make all the difference in the world.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Well. Are there any final questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, everyone, I want to thank you for joining us today, and Jake, thank you so much for sharing this knowledge, because it
Absolutely.
helps all of us each day. So, as we spoke in the beginning, this has been recorded. It will be downloaded and posted on our YouTube page and sent out to all participants and registrants who couldn't make it today. So, Jake, thank you very much.
Of course.
And I appreciate all you being here, and have an awesome afternoon.
And Debbie, you and I have to talk again soon.
I know. It's good to see you. Nice
All
meeting
right.
all of you.
Awesome. Have a
Thank
great
you,
day,
everybody.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.